For center number 1, we're going to be working on diagramming sentences, and after you watch the screencast, I will be coming over and we'll be doing most of this together. But I do want you to watch this to kind of take some notes and get a little introduction to what diagramming sentences is all about. Primarily, we're going to get to the point where we're looking at the functions of phrases, prepositional phrases in the sentence. But first we have to know and look at the basic components, which are your subject and your verb. So you have this handout at your center. You're going to take it and fold it in half to make a little booklet. This will be your first page, and then this is the inside cover. We'll get to doing this part together. You may just have to do this last part on your own, but we're going to do this until we feel pretty comfortable helping each other figure out what part goes where. The screencast that you're going to watch, you're going to be filling this information in. So you can see I have the answers here for you now. Your answer document or your notes document is going to be blank. And as you watch this video right now, I want you to fill in the information. So we start by looking at the two basic parts of a sentence: the subject, who the sentence is about, and the verb that tells what the subject did. If you look at this sentence here, Mrs. Culleton ran, what we're doing is dividing it and putting the information into a diagram, which is why it's called sentence diagramming. A little chart, I call it a T-chart, where we put our subject on the top left and our verb on the right. So if I wanted to diagram this sentence, I start by drawing that little T-chart, and I look at the sentence and ask myself, who is the sentence about? It's about Mrs. Culleton. So that goes on the top right part of this diagram. And then I ask, what did that subject do? Mrs. Culleton ran. That goes on the top right part. Okay, we're not going to really worry about punctuation because once we've put these parts into the sentence, we should be able to kind of read the sentence by looking at where things are located in the diagram. Now, very few sentences are ever going to be just two words, your subject and your verb. You're going to have some modifiers in there. And we've talked about adjectives and adverbs as modifiers. So we look at our subject and our verb. If we have words describing our subject is either going to be a noun or a pronoun. And that's what adjectives describe. So we would draw this diagonal line here and list any of the adjectives that go under there. If I had 3 adjectives describing my subject, then I would draw 3 diagonal lines like this, and starting from the left to the right is where I would put my adjectives in the order that they appear. If the first word in the sentence is an adjective, you have to make sure that you capitalize it. So just by looking at a sentence diagram, I should be able to tell where the first word of the sentence is based on which word is capitalized. Now we've also got modifiers that describe verbs. Those are adverbs. Just like adjectives, we would put a diagonal line underneath the verb column, and that's where we would list our adverbs. If I had 2 or 3, again, I would just put 2 or 3 diagonal lines and list my adverbs in the order that they appear in the sentence. We know that adverbs can also modify adjectives. If you ever get in a situation where you have an adjective modifying an adverb, we just kind of draw this parallel line underneath the adjective mark, and that's where we put our adverb. So let's look at a sentence. The scary spider crawled quickly. I start with my T-chart, and I think of, what is the sentence about? It's about a spider. Once we get into sentences that have lots of words in them, it might be good for you to cross off words with your pencil or highlighter because it eliminates words that you have to put in your diagram. I know my subject is spider, so I want to know, what did the spider do? It crawled. There's my verb. The spider crawled. Now I can see I've got 3 words left in there. So the and scary are in front of spider. They describe the spider. I have 2 adjectives, so I'm going to draw 2 diagonal lines under here. The first adjective is the. Notice it's the first word in the sentence, so I have to capitalize it. And then another word that describes the spider is scary. Okay, and that goes on the second line. I still have the word quickly. I know that it ends in an ly. We talked about that as being a clue to helping us recognize adverbs. It answers the question how. How did the spider crawl? It crawled quickly. So I draw my diagonal line under crawled, and I fill in my adverb. I'm not sure how much time you spent last year talking about appositives, but you're going to see appositives a lot in 7th grade. I try to get you to write with appositives. They're great for adding description. And an appositive is really renaming a noun. So in the sentence here, I've got a subject followed by my appositive. It has to come right after the noun. We're only really working with subjects right now, but we'll talk about direct objects and predicate nouns later. They can come after those as well, as long as they come right after the noun that they're going to be describing. We're going to see them in sentences separated by commas, but when we're writing them in a sentence diagram, we put them in parentheses. And it's going to be another noun. So you have a noun and then another noun that's going to rename it that has some modifiers. Mrs. Culleton, the frightened teacher, quickly ran away. You can see my commas here separate that appositive. You can take that appositive out. Mrs. Culleton quickly ran away. But now I have a little more context to who is Mrs. Culleton. She's the frightened teacher. So we start by putting our subject on the line, Mrs. Culleton, and we look at what did Mrs. Culleton do? She ran. If I were crossing these out on my paper, that would help me eliminate words that I have to work on. Now I'm looking for the appositive, the noun that renames Mrs. Culleton. I'm going to put that in parentheses after her. Mrs. Culleton is a teacher. Now I can see that I have some modifiers for the teacher. What kind of teacher is it? The and frightened. I'm not going to put these adjectives under Mrs. Culleton because it's not the frightened Mrs. Culleton, it's the frightened teacher. So words that modify have to go underneath the words that they modify. And then I still have two adverbs over here. How did she run? Quickly. And where did she run? Away. You can see they're split by the verb, but they're both in the order in my sentence diagram, in the order in which they appear in the sentence. The last thing that we're going to talk about today are prepositional phrases. We've got prepositional phrases as adjectives. We know that adjectives modify nouns. So if we see a prepositional phrase describing a noun, in this case our subject, we're going to draw this diagonal line and connect it with a parallel line with our subject-verb line. Your preposition will go on this line, and then your noun, which is the object of the preposition, goes on this line. So I have the blue birds in the trees. In is my preposition, trees is my noun, and just like with any modifier, it goes on a diagonal line underneath the word it modifies. The describes the trees. Here we have an adverb modifying a verb, and it's a prepositional phrase modifying the verb being used as an adverb. So we start with the preposition on the diagonal line, the noun, which is the object of the preposition, on the straight line, and any modifiers or adjectives underneath that. So I have the rabbit hopped through the pretty garden. Through is my preposition. Through what? Through the garden. There's my noun. And then I've got two adjectives that describe the garden. So in my sentence, I have one adjective or one prepositional phrase that's going to be used as an adjective and one that's going to be used as an adverb. We're going to start the same way though. We're going to start with, what do we know? Our subject and our verb. Who is my sentence about? It's about a dog. What did the dog do? The dog jumped. There's my verb. So I've got my subject and my verb. Now I'm going to look for some modifiers. I know that the describes the dog. I also have some description about that dog with the blue collar, and I recognize with as a preposition. So here I'm going to need a prepositional phrase line. So I start with the diagonal line, and this is where my noun's going to go. With is my preposition. With what? With the collar. Now I still have two words here, the and blue, and I can tell that those two words are describing the collar, so they're going to go on these diagonal lines. They're adjectives modifying my noun, the and blue, and I keep them in the order in which they appear in the sentence. So I have the dog with the blue collar jumped. Jumped where? On me. So I start with my diagonal line for my preposition, and my straight line for my object of the preposition. On is the preposition. On whom or what? On me. There's my noun. So don't get too overwhelmed with this. This is just a quick introduction. I wanted to show all of it to you at one time before we get to practicing it, and that's what we'll be doing once everyone has watched this video.